See, all of us know very well that every jurisdiction has lot of differences. It is not only today; it has been there forever. So one of the biggest difficulties for the international trader or an international businessman was to find out a correct mechanism which is effective to resolve their disputes, which are mostly cross borders. The first effort, if you see that immediately after the Second World War, all the developed countries realized that without a smooth international dispute recognition mechanism, resolution mechanism is not there, then trading cannot happen effectively, and also the wealth will not go to the all the parts of the world, which was considered to be one of the reasons for the Second World War. As few countries were becoming very rich, many countries could not enjoy the fruits of the global economical development. So many efforts were taken to bring in some kind of a common mechanism which can be understood by the traders and businessmen as well as the lawyers without much of a procedural law difficulties. All of us know very well the procedural law creates many complicated code procedures which cannot be easily understood by the people from the other jurisdictions. So at this point of time, the first step which was achieved by the global community with the help of United Nations was bringing in a global enforceability for arbitration awards by introducing a convention called New York Convention on Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Awards. Even immediately after the Second World War, also, if you see, all the developed countries had their own mechanism of arbitration proceedings. But the difficulty arose in enforcing and recognizing those awards in the other jurisdictions. So at that time, the global community thought that we should try to come into a mechanism by which the awards made in one country is recognized in the other courts of the member countries. So the first brilliant effort was taken in 1958, and at that point of time only 52 countries were signatories including India. We are a founders signatory to the convention. Now 163 countries have signed the New York Convention. What we are understanding or what we should understand about New York Convention is very simple. The member countries will recognize, first of all, an international arbitration award has to be recognized like a court decree. That is phase one. That should be done. Number two is enforcing that award, treating it like a court degree. These are the two important aspects or objectives of the New York Convention. So, whoever is the member country will recognize the award from the other member country. For example, Hong Kong award is there, an award arising out of a Hong Kong arbitration. It should come to India, and an Indian court will recognize that based on the New York Convention and then enforce it through a court of law. So this is the process which is accepted. There are some limitations. Let us not go into that now. But now what we should understand is almost like 163 countries recognize each other in enforcing and recognizing the arbitration awards. To that extent, we should understand. The second one is second major effort came in the year 1985. What is that major effect is every country had a different arbitration legislation which were having different complicated processes. Some of the countries were recognizing the local civil procedure into the arbitration practice procedure. Some countries were not recognizing, some were simplifying, some were complicating. So the issue was not getting settled. For a common lawyer who is advising a client, supplying materials to different countries, understanding the intricacies of the arbitration law of different countries was also a major obstacle. So finally, people ended up in very expensive commercial litigations, going to the defendant's country and trying to enforce that and recover that money. All those things became a major challenge. So UNCITRAL took an effort to create a model law and lobby to all the members of the United Nations, requesting them to adopt a similar law. So that all the countries, the objective was if most of the countries have a similar law, similar challenge procedure, similar appointment procedure, similar challenging of the awards, similar enforcement mechanism, then it will be easy. So the procedural law, which is the Arbitration and Conciliation Act in India, is almost similar to the model law with few modifications to that. Similarly, if you see globally, about 63 countries officially recognize themselves as model law countries. Whoever is claiming themselves to be model law country means that they have adopted the UNCITRAL model laws concepts as it is or with little modifications. Even like if you see countries like China, Taiwan, who never say we are a model law country, they say that we are not a model law country. But if you see the provisions, finally it will be almost similar to the UNCITRAL model law. So now you can assume to a certain extent that globally we have a uniform arbitration law. So what we have two tools in our hand, effective tools is one, majority of the world has a similar arbitration law. Number two is majority of the world recognizes the awards passed in the New York Convention country and allow them to be enforced against their citizens or companies in those countries. So these are the two aspects. At the cost of repetition, I am telling now we have a uniform law, uniform recognition mechanism, uniform enforcement mechanism. Now the system is complete. So now let us go into the second part. All of us know very well that the arbitration starts from the arbitration clause. In domestically also, internationally also, we know that once you put an arbitration clause in your contract, then the parties are bound to approach the arbitration process instead of going to the court process. National courts cannot entertain a civil proceeding when the contract has an arbitration proceeding. This is also globally recognized practice, and this is also a part of the UNCITRAL model law. So while drafting an arbitration clause, many times uh, it has a lot of deficiencies. Whenever an arbitration clause is having some deficiency or inaccuracy or some kind of a vagueness, it pushes the parties to the court unnecessarily to clarify the arbitration clause itself. So now, what are the major components we require? We are all lawyers, so what are the components or features which we should insist to be incorporated in the arbitration agreement? Number one is the seat of arbitration. Let us simply understand it. In the further slides, I will go into the detail. Seat of arbitration is a place which can be chosen by the parties. You can choose any place. The concept of neutrality also comes. A person from India and a person from China are signing a contract. They need not choose either India or China as the seat of arbitration. They can choose a neutral country as the seat of arbitration. That is why you might have heard that many people are going to London, many are going to Singapore, many are going to Hong Kong these days for choosing those seats as the neutral seats. I will come into the details little later. Now let us understand only one point, that each arbitration agreement should specify a place as the seat of arbitration. Number two is globally, internationally, arbitral institutions conduct arbitrations. In India, more than 75% of the arbitrations till today are handled in an ad hoc manner. That means there will be nobody to administer. The arbitrator himself will administer the arbitration. The arbitrator himself will fix the fees. The arbitrator himself will maintain the records. The arbitral tribunal or the arbitrator himself will manage the whole process till the completion of the arbitration proceeding. But it is so difficult when we are doing international arbitrations for various reasons. Number one is transparency, fixed fee schedule, and a clear process of arbitration and keeping of records. So many other things come in. I'll explain to you later. So everybody chooses an arbitral institution and put it in the arbitration clause itself. When you, for example, Singapore International Arbitration Center is an arbitral institution. Same way, International Chamber of Commerce, ICC arbitration. There are various Indian institutions also, like Delhi Institute of Arbitration and Mumbai International Center for International Arbitration. All these are all arbitral institutions. So we should advise our client to put any one of the arbitral institutions, taking into consideration the costs and other aspects. But here I would like to say one thing, that by choosing Singapore International Arbitration Center, it does not mean that seat of arbitration will be Singapore. You can have the seat of arbitration in Chennai or even Coimbatore, but arbitral institution can be SIAC. They will administer arbitration in any city all over the world. So most of the arbitral institutions don't insist for a seat to be fixed. Few institutions, particularly ICC and SIAC, do not have even a default seat specified in their rules. Other institutions, if you don't specify a seat of arbitration, then there will be a default seat of arbitration mentioned. For example, Hong Kong International Arbitration Center. In your arbitration clause, if you choose Hong Kong International Arbitration Center as the institution to administer your arbitration, then if you miss out choosing the seat of arbitration, then the seat of arbitration will be only Hong Kong. Same way, different institutions have different rules. So while choosing an institution, just to go visit their site, go through the rules, understand them, and then recommend to your party. Most of the institutions also have a fee calculator, so you can use that to estimate the cost of the arbitration as well. Then the third one is substantive laws, and you can also choose laws which will be applicable to the arbitration proceeding. Substantive law and procedural law are different. I will come to that later. Procedural law means law like Arbitration and Conciliation Act, Limitation Act. These kind of things come as procedural law, which govern the arbitration and the process. Substantive law is the one by which you are applying those principles to interpret the constitution and decide the disputes. In international arbitration, parties have so much of independence that they can choose a different procedural law of a different country and substantive law of another country also. It is not necessary that you have to choose the same country's laws, but you have a liberty. That does not mean that always you have to choose different laws. It can be same also. And parties also should decide the number of arbitrators. It can be 1 or 3 or whatever number, but please incorporate in your arbitration agreement. Then the most important thing is language of arbitration. Because if you don't choose the language of arbitration in advance, then the default language of the institution or the country will be applicable. For example, I'll tell you an example. If you choose Taiwan, Taipei, the city is capital city of Taiwan, as the arbitration seat, then you don't specify or you fail to specify the language of arbitration, then even though parties communicated in English, parties have an agreement in English, still the default law will be Cantonese. So all the documents have to be translated into Cantonese. You should have a lawyer who is knowing their language, and all the rules, everything will be based on that local language. So you should be very careful in incorporating the language of arbitration in the clause and the law governing the arbitration agreement. There are three laws normally have to be specifically mentioned in the arbitration agreement. As I told you, procedural law, substantive law, and law governing the arbitration agreement. All can be of the same countries or different also. That you have to decide in consultation with the party and after understanding the intricacies of the law. This is the basic international arbitration clause. Once again, I am telling you seat of arbitration, name of the arbitral institution, substantive laws, number of arbitrators, language of arbitration, and law governing the arbitration agreement. If you specify these six aspects into an arbitration agreement, it will be an effective arbitration agreement which requires no interpretation by the courts. So now let me see seat selection. How you will select the seat. I told you a little bit. Now I'm telling you again. A seat need not be the place of either of the parties. As I told you, a party from Singapore, another party from India. They are coming to you for finalizing the arbitration clause. So at this point of time, you can advise either India as a seat or Singapore as a seat. You can also choose a different seat, which is called as a neutral seat. Because sometimes parties, particularly if you see clients from European countries and clients from Asian countries, they always think that if we go to their seat, they will have some additional advantages and we will have some additional disadvantages. In many places, it doesn't happen this way, but still parties are comfortable when you recommend a neutral seat. But at the same time, when you are choosing a neutral seat, you should be very careful about the cost, about the other intricacies. For example, if parties are from a common law jurisdictions, then they will be more comfortable with the common law practices. So you should also choose a seat which has the common law practice. Same way, you should see the distance. For example, there is a dispute between a Indian and a Chinese party. You need not go all the way to New York for a seat. You can do it in Hong Kong, you can do it in Singapore, or you can do it in Malaysia, anywhere, because everything has a cost. Now, while signing the contract, we don't know what is going to be the cost. But when you end up in a dispute, everything matters a lot. So please be careful in selecting a seat. You can also choose a neutral seat. The second one is here I have explained how seat selection happens. First is people choose a neutral seat. Sometimes parties compel the other party. For example, any Indian PSU these days do not choose a foreign seat, do not agree for a foreign seat. Most of them. So similarly, if you go to a deal with a big Chinese PSU company, they will accept either China seated arbitrations or they prefer Hong Kong seated arbitrations. This will be because of the size and strength of the one of the parties. That is okay. Those are all neutral seats, no problem on that. Statutory requirements. And you should also keep in mind that there are some statutory requirements which you should know. For example, if you are choosing an international ICC arbitration and you are putting China cities like Beijing as an arbitral, um, as a seat of arbitration, that arbitration clause will become unenforceable, because in the land of China, no foreign institution can administer the arbitrations. The Chinese have about 600 arbitration centers. They are most of them are well established. Most of them have foreign arbitrators in their panel, and many of them are very, very advanced in the procedural aspects. And the costs are also very low. When you compare with an international institution, Chinese institutions charge very low fees. But you should know, okay, China I'm going, so I should not choose a foreign institution to administer. Otherwise, you should go to Hong Kong. Hong Kong, even though is a part of China, they recognize it as an independent territory. So Chinese Hong Kong awards are um, more easy to enforce in China. At the same time, Hong Kong entertains all the arbitral institutions to administer the arbitration in Hong Kong. So now the next one, importance of the seat. What all you coming with the seat, or how you will choose a seat. It is not because of the fancy, okay, party is from Japan and another party is from India, so we will go to Singapore. Everybody is telling Singapore, Singapore. It is not the way. You should know the reasons why you are recommending a seat to your client. First thing what you have to see is the procedural law. Whether the procedural law is similar to UNCITRAL model law. Then you know our Arbitration Act and other countries' Arbitration Act will be similar. We know the framework. We know the basic fundamental aspects of that law also. You can download and see that law also. But preferably, you should choose a seat which is a seat in which procedural law is a model law. So, for example, you are choosing Singapore. Singapore International Arbitration Act is similar to the model law. So, it is easy to understand. We will also know what are the features in it. Number two, second important thing what you have to see is speedy and effective disposal by the supervising courts. Whenever you choose a seat doesn't come alone. Seat come with two other additions. One is the procedural law. Number two is the supervising courts. For example, you are choosing Coimbatore as the seat of arbitration. You are choosing, so you what are the other things come with that? The procedural law governing the arbitration will be Arbitration and Conciliation Act. This comes on its own free. Number two is the supervising courts. Which are the supervising courts? Not the Coimbatore courts. Now, any matter relating to international arbitration in India is governed by the high courts only. So, the Chennai High Court will have the jurisdiction with regard to the arbitration which is seated in Coimbatore. So you should know how the supervising courts are conducting themselves. One of the reasons why people go to Singapore is that the supervising courts are very fast, and most of the judges are well trained and they are aware of the international practices of the arbitration. So people go there. Similarly, London also, and New York also, Paris also. These are all very mature jurisdictions where people tend to go for high value dispute resolution. In our country, I will say the one of the major bottlenecks for the lesser growth, I can say it is growing, but lesser growth of international arbitration is because of the pendency in the courts. We cannot blame the judges. They are working much harder heavier than many other their colleague counterparts all over the world. But still, since there are only less number of codes and huge number of tendencies there, it gets delayed. And the third aspect, what you have to see is the enforceability. You should not choose a seat which is not a New York Convention seat. If you choose a place which is not a New York Convention seat, then enforceability will be a problem. So you should choose a seat which is a signatory to the New York Convention. And I can say now India seated international arbitrations. I will also recommend to you that when you are advising your clients, always we need not choose the foreign seats. There are some good aspects in Indian seat also. So you can also explain them, even the foreign party, that these are the strengths of having an arbitration seated in India. One is the first strength is procedural law. As I told you, Indian law is almost similar to the model law. So everybody will love to have a seat in India. And we are also a New York Convention signatory. And the appointment of arbitrators in the matter of ad hoc arbitrations, it is done by Supreme Court, and it is done very fast. There is no delay. And if it is institutions, then institutions themselves can appoint the arbitrators. There is no difficulty in that. And another thing, another strength of our Indian jurisdiction is, as I told you, in countries like China, they don't allow foreign institutions to come and administer the arbitrations. But in India, it is not like that. Any global institution, any international or foreign institution can come and administer arbitrations in India, provided they register themselves with the Supreme Court. It is a simple process. So almost every institution can administer the arbitration in India. Then supervising courts, since they are high courts, and they are also giving priority to the arbitration related litigation, and India is a good jurisdiction. Finality of the awards, all of you know well, Supreme Court has trimmed the law so much that courts will have very less um, opportunity or requirement in interfering the arbitration awards. And the enforcement of arbitration awards, as I told you, India is a New York Convention country. So awards arising out of India are globally enforceable. There is no difficulty in that. When I was talking about the ad hoc and institutional arbitration, many of you may be having a doubt. What is the exact difference between them? The green portion is, you can say, talks about the ad hoc arbitration. Parties shall resolve their disputes by way of arbitration. This is enough if you want to go only to ad hoc arbitration. Then what happens from the time of appointment of arbitrator till the end of the arbitration proceeding? Whenever there is a dispute or an issue, you have to go to the court to get it clarified. But if you have an institution as an administering institution specified in your clause, then most of the difficulties can be resolved in the institution level itself. The rule itself will explain many of the issues. So that is the major difference. And if you don't put the arbitral institution, the arbitral process will be managed by the arbitrator only. There will be no arbitration rules. So the arbitrator has to decide the procedure by his own, and fees also will not be fixed by anybody else. Only the arbitrator will fix. Sometimes it may be surprising to the other parties, but in our institutional arbitration, the fixed fee schedule is published by the institutions in their website. So you will be able to estimate the fee and there will be no surprise. And the procedural law of an Indian seat, all of you know well, 1940 Act was a pre-model law legislation. Then 1996 we brought the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. Then 2015, it got revised again. Timelines, transparency, reduced interference by the courts was the achievement of 2015. 2019 has come out with amendments relating to institutionalizing the arbitration in India and qualification for the arbitrators. And with regard to the Indian law, all of you know well, Arbitration and Conciliation Act is 1996 is applicable for the procedure, and Code of Civil Procedure and Evidence Act are expressly excluded, and the Limitation Act is applicable, but the other substantive laws are applicable. So any arbitration which has chosen India as the seat, Arbitration and Conciliation Act will be the procedural law. Substantive law, if they choose Indian laws, then all these other laws also will apply. And now I'm little bit talking about the Indian aspect of it. That is one of the most interesting aspects of Indian procedural law is the efforts taken by the lawmakers to ensure independence and impartiality of the arbitrators. Actually, originally, International Bar Association prepared a rules or like a guidelines to avoid conflict of interest in international arbitration. Luckily, our government also picked up the same and incorporated into the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. So now the parties and the arbitrators, if they have a relationship, that can end up as a disqualification to continue as an arbitrator. You cannot suppress it because you need to disclose the relationship not only with the party but also with the counsels appearing for the parties. So this is a very welcome move internationally. The second aspect is Indian courts are empowered to give interim orders in support of a foreign seated arbitration. This is a very, very welcomed move because it was not available earlier. So, always parties had difficulties in taking an interim order against an Indian party because you know very well, as per the New York Convention, an interim award is not enforceable in India. Only a final award is enforceable in India. So the interim order given by the court is a very great welcome move in the international arbitration. And always courts as well as Indian government is trying to reduce the scope of public policy to avoid unnecessary interferences by the courts. That is another welcome move. Timelines. Nowhere in the world, nowhere in the world, timelines are prescribed in the Arbitration Act itself. In our act, timelines are prescribed. So if you ask me, an ICC administered arbitration in Singapore will take more time than the Indian process. But now it is relaxed for international arbitrations, but still domestic arbitrations, the timelines are very, very helpful. Delegation of court powers to arbitral institutions. Now, you know very well in the recent amendments in 2015, the high courts will recognize some arbitral institutions who will exercise the power of Section 11 to appoint arbitrators. That is a very, very welcome move. And the enforceability of interim orders passed by the arbitrators. Now, interim awards or interim orders passed by the arbitrators are enforceable in India. I already told you. Arbitral institutions, any foreign arbitration institution can administer arbitration in India. Registration is required in the High Court or Supreme Court. There are many Indian arbitral institutions handling international arbitrations. And even though 80% of the arbitrations in India, seated in India, are ad hoc arbitrations, people are changing to institution arbitration, which is a welcome move. And qualifications of the arbitrators are also prescribed. You must have seen that. But I had an opportunity to challenge the same in the Supreme Court as a party in person. Now government has come forward to withdraw Schedule 8 from the Arbitration Act. So now there is no specific provision which is regulating the qualification of arbitrators. Only the parties have to choose. Supervising courts appoint the arbitrators, give interim orders, disqualification of arbitrators are done in that. In each and every country also, challenge to the award can be done in the seat only. When you are choosing the seat, till the challenge procedure is complete, the supervising courts of that seat will have the power to administer. And in India also is becoming a welcome international seat because of three important things. One is confidentiality of the arbitration proceedings. Number two, one-sided arbitration clauses are not permitted in India. And prior to challenging an arbitration award, you require to make a pre-deposit of 70% of the arbitration award amount, because award is treated as a money decree. So it's a wonderful move. And now this is just a repetition. India is a model law country. We are a New York Convention signatory. Timelines are there. Foreign institutions are there.